Hello, good afternoon everybody. My name is Yanto Chandra. I'm Associate Professor and Director of the Center for Social Policy and Social Entrepreneurship at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I'm going to present to you all a summary, just a key summary of a relatively large research project that was funded by the SIE Fund that started in 2016, and we just completed them in February 2020. And in this research project, we're going to look at what makes some social innovation perform better than the others. It is relatively an exploration, but we're going to talk more about this in a moment. Today on the 25th of February 2020. So let me go through a quick overview of what I'm going to discuss in the next 15 or 20 minutes. I'll start with the background and then why I'm doing this research, the research question itself, and a little bit of literature review, given that there is still relatively very little research on empirical research on social innovation. And I will summarize the two studies that have been completed, and I'll talk a little bit about the contributions to theory, the conclusions, and implications to policy and recommendations. We all know what is social innovation, but at least to start this, we need to come up with a definition, right? There has been quite a number of different definitions of what social innovation is all about. But I'm citing here a paper from Stanford Social Innovation Review that defines social innovation as a novel solution to social problems. Typically, the benefits or the value of this type of innovation will go to the society rather than to a particular individuals. And we all know that social innovation is a fast-growing field of research and practice, and it has attracted the attention of experts and scholars from various disciplines, in business to healthcare, to social work, design, geography, development, public administration, to sociology and politics. And this is just one example of a baby or infant warmer that was developed by several students from Stanford University as one part of their school projects, in which they're developing a tool, a baby warmer that costs only 1% of a baby incubator. So it works using a very simple design, very simple technology, and they're able to create a social enterprise, NGO as well, and they're launching a commercial version as well. So it started with a social innovation but branched it out into various different things. So why did I start this research? It started with an observation that some social innovation are much more successful than others. What do I mean by successful? Successful means they are more innovative, they are more useful and more impactful than some other social innovations. Because some of them can be very innovative but not impactful or not that useful, or very useful or impactful but not that so innovative. But we don't know why some of them may have all of these elements. And a lot of research in social innovation so far, those that have been published in academic journals and books, tends to be conceptual, discussing a lot of concepts about what it is not, and talking a lot about anecdotal stories, or just focusing on a very broad policy issues. But there's very little research that tries to examine why and how social innovation becomes innovative, useful, and impactful to solve various complex social problems. So I came to these two research questions. Why do social innovators develop innovative, useful, and impactful social innovation? And in particular, what factors and processes explain the development of highly innovative, useful, and impactful social innovation? I went to do the literature review before I collected the data, and from the literature review, one of the most important literature that has emerged in this field is the literature on social innovation strategy. We all know what is strategy. Strategy means how to do things to achieve certain results. And there has been a number of papers that have been published on this that look at not all strategy produce the same kind of results. Different strategy may produce different kind of outcomes. For example, the paper by Mayer and even my own paper look at the different kind of strategies that can be done. But if you want to theoretically classify them, there are at least two types of this strategy. We can call them a social strategy or commercial strategy. Social strategy refers to the strategies that are aimed to solve the social problems. For example, if you are a social innovator and you are coming up with an idea, with a solution to help youth at risk to become more employable in the labor market, because we know that they may find it difficult to find employment, then this type of strategy is what we call a social strategy. But there are also what we call commercial strategy. These are the strategies that generate the income for the social innovators. For example, if you charge fees to some clients, let's say some big companies who employ this youth at risk, and this is part of the commercial strategy. So a social innovation may have only a social strategy bit. It can also have the commercial strategy bit, or it can have a combination of both. So we don't know to what extent the good social innovation have what elements, both or one or the other. And then there's a literature from innovation and entrepreneurship. We all know that human capital is very important, and a lot of research have shown that individuals who have higher human capital as a quality of the human capital, such as having better knowledge, better education, or better work, or certain type of work experience, are more likely to perform better in creating innovative and entrepreneurial work. Another strand of literature looking at the social capital, which tells us that certain social entrepreneurs or social innovators, their relationships, their social structure, their memberships in certain organizations broadly can influence their ability to draw on resources, to develop trust, to gather information, and in recognizing opportunity. So basically there are three parts: the social innovation strategy, the human capital, and the social capital. In study one, I collected samples internationally, and I did quantitative content analysis as well as in-depth interviews. For the quantitative content analysis of this international sample, the focus of this content analysis is on projects, so social innovation projects, right? So we selected 151 social innovation projects from a tournament or a competition hosted by Ashoka and eBay, and this tournament is called Powering Economic Opportunity. So the focus is more on poverty alleviation. So in these 150 projects, 15 of them are finalists, and 135 of them are non-winners. So there are winners and non-winners, if you call them. And we created a 2-page vignette that describes the content of each of the social innovation projects in terms of the strategy that they used and different elements of their human capital and social capital. And then we collected various information from the Ashoka and also from public available information, including from LinkedIn, Facebook, websites, and we pulled them together into a 2-page vignette. And then we found 2 raters. One is a director of an impact investing company based in Canada, and one is an internal rater, an academic based in Hong Kong. So these 2 raters read each of these 150 projects, and they try to rate them. And we have an inter-rater reliability of 0.799, which means that the similarity of their conclusion about which social innovation projects are more successful or less successful are very consistent, which is actually above 0.6 is already very good, and we have 0.799, nearly 0.8. And if you look at out of these 150 projects that the 2 raters have been evaluating, half of them match the actual winners in the tournament hosted by Ashoka and eBay, and 93.8% match the low performing ones. So what can this tell us? This tells us that the raters very much can easily agree on what social innovation projects that are considered low performing, but almost half of the time they agree on which projects can be considered high performing. But this is relatively good. So this content analysis is trying to understand whether the social strategy and commercial strategy, so we measure each of these social and commercial strategy in terms of whether they are product-based strategy, process-based strategy, and partner-based strategy. So we have 6 though, 3 of them for social strategy and 3 of them for commercial strategy. And then we also measure a number of items on social capital and a number of items like education, gender, age, work experience for human capital. And we try to analyze whether these variables, what we call independent variables, will predict or influence the social innovation performance. And we define social innovation performance in terms of the innovativeness, usefulness, and impact. And in order to maintain more validity of these findings, the 2 raters are looking at the external, the dependent variables, those social innovation performance, the innovativeness, the usefulness, the impact. And then we have internal teams who come up with evaluating which of these social strategies, social capital, and human capital. So we have separate teams to look at the dependent variables and independent variables. So that is to avoid what we call a certain bias or endogeneity bias. So what does the regression analysis tell us in this analysis? We have ranked which of these variables that are most important in this order. So we found that the commercial strategies in which social innovation that have income generating activities tend to be the most important predictor of the performance, which comprise of this innovativeness, usefulness, and impact. So social innovation projects that have commercial strategies, that is having income generating strategies, are most likely to perform better than those that are not. And social innovation projects that networks build relationship with for-profit companies, big companies, are also likely to produce better performance. And if you have more males in the founding team, unfortunately, this is from international samples, are more likely to have a better performance. And partnership-based social strategy are also going to produce better performance. The rest of the variables are not significant. So this tells us that commercial strategies, partnering with for-profit companies, having more males in the team, and having a partnership-based social strategy are important to drive the social innovation performance. And then we dig deeper by conducting in-depth interviews. We conducted interviews with 7 high-performing and 7 low-performing social innovation projects from the international samples. And then we actually look at, out of these 7 high-performing, how many of them are actually the actual winners in the competition. And actually 4 of them are the actual winners, which is not bad. And then 4 out of 7. And then all of the low-performing social innovation projects that have been rated by the raters, actually the actual winners, the actual non-winners in the actual competition. So this shows the overlap between the data that we included in interviews are very much consistent to the actual tournament results. And we use a software to analyze this systematically, and we compare between the high-performing and low-performing social innovation projects to identify some differences in terms of the strategies that they adopted, the human capital, social capital, and other emerging factors. These are the findings. We found that the high-performing social innovation projects were more likely to be original in their social strategy. I'll give you one example. One project from Rwanda that developed a new recharging hub that allows the social the community really they engage the community to take part in selling this. So they develop a new recharge hub that can lower the cost of the energy use in the rural areas. So being original is important. The second characteristics of these high-performing projects is they address multiple problems at one go. For example, there's a social innovation project from Uganda that develops a new menstruation pad for women to address hygiene problems, while at the same time they empower the women to work as micro-entrepreneurs to sell these pads, right? And then they have multiple revenue models. And one example from this is very amazing. There's a school-based social innovation project that has 15 different income-generating units. They have an education unit, they have a vegetable gardens, they have a reforestation, they have farms to raise chicken, pigs, rabbits, goats, bees, they have a cheese factory, they have a rural hotel. This is a project from Paraguay. And the third characteristics are those that have partnership with the business sector. So for example, there's this one project from India that developed strong partnership with a network, mobile network operator, with the Chamber of Commerce, with industry associations who are very ready to provide them any help whenever this social innovation project needs it. And of course, those are the examples from the low performing that will be mentioned later in the report. But at least this is what I can quickly show. And also the other characteristics of those that are high performing, they tend to receive funding from different sources. For example, this social innovation project from India received fundings from all the great foundations that we have ever heard of, from UAE, from Walmart, from Bill and Melinda Gates, from Schwab, and having these different sources of funding helped them to perform better. And also prior knowledge and experience in the business sector was apparently very important. So for example, this project from India, the founder has experience and work in the marketing field, in the food industry, and he has an MBA. So having prior knowledge is very important in the business area. So if you were to come up with a summary of study 1 of the international samples, there are at least 4 characteristics that we can come up with that define or that drive the social innovation project that have low performing. They tend to lack in originality, they tend to not to have a revenue model, they tend to rely on a single funding source, or they don't have a clear funding source, and they tend to lack networks with the business sector. While the high performing ones have the reverse of all these things. They are more original, they have a very good revenue model, different kind of single funding source, they have a good networks with the business sectors, and the founders tend to have rich and strong business background, or have a strong partnerships with the business sector. And then we conducted the second study that focuses on the Hong Kong sample. Again, we conducted the quantitative content analysis and in-depth interviews. So in the quantitative content analysis of this Hong Kong sample, we have 60 social innovation projects which we identified from SIE Fund's database, and 15 of them are winners and 35 of them are non-winners, which means that these 15 winners are the ones that received funding from SIE Fund, and the 35 are the ones that did not receive any funding from SIE Fund. So winners and non-winners. And in the same way, we created a 2-page vignette or description about each of the 60 social innovation projects based on the strategy that they use, the social strategy, the commercial strategy to change the world, the information about the projects, on the founders, on the social capitals, on their human capitals. And again, the same two raters, the director of the impact investing and one internal rater who is an academic and expert on social entrepreneurship and innovation, rated all these projects. And again, we have same inter-rater reliability of 0.799 and 50% match between the high performing in this project versus the actual tournament winners, and 93.8 match between these low performing projects from the rating compared to the actual tournament results. So, and these are the results of the regression analysis that we have rank ordered. So we found that social innovation projects that have founders who have work experience in companies are more likely to predict higher social innovation performance in terms of innovativeness, usefulness, and impact. And those social innovation projects that received resources from companies are more likely to be performing better, and social innovation projects that have networks with civil society organizations. So if you recalled, in the international samples we didn't have this, but for Hong Kong sample we found that the social innovation projects that have partnerships or networks with the civil society organizations are more likely to perform better. And then those that adopted a product-based commercial strategy, which means that if you have a commercial strategy, an income-generating strategy, and it is in the form of product, then it's more likely to drive a better performance for the social innovation. And then we dig deeper after these regression results by conducting in-depth interviews. So we conducted interviews with 9 high-performing social innovation projects and 8 low-performing. And we also compare whether these 9 are actual winners in the competition or not. Out of these 9 high-performing, 4 of them are actual winners in the tournament, which means that they actually received the funding from SIE Fund, and 8 of these low-performing, 7 out of these 8 performing are non-winners, which means that they didn't receive the funding. Which means that 7 out of 8 are low-performing. Very consistent in terms of the numbers, right? And then we use a software to analyze them systematically, and we did a comparative analysis on the differences in their strategies, the human capital and social capital. These are the qualitative findings. We found that the high-performing social innovation projects are more likely to have these components. First, they have unusual actors. They added unusual actors in the social strategy. This is one example, a social innovation project that engages the young children to visit elderly homes, where in the past, most of them are usually involving adults. So they are engaging young children. So because young children are not the normal component of this social innovation, so they added this component, young children, to be a part of a social innovation project that pay visits to the elderly homes. So we found this is one of the characteristics or drivers of social innovation performance in Hong Kong. And secondly, the high-performing social innovation project in Hong Kong tend to change the social relations as part of their social strategy. Let me give you one example. This is a project that tried to empower the housewives to provide escort services in their neighborhoods. So if you have housewives that take part in escorting services, where these housewives are typically staying at home, actually you are changing somehow the social relations among the people in the neighborhoods, where these housewives were typically kind of like excluded from the society, and they're changing how these social relations are operating. And the third characteristics or drivers is the originality in their social strategy. We found that the social innovation project that develops, for example, that develops a wearable device and robotics to have patients who are elderly or disabled to treat their disability. So they have a very strong originality in terms of using technology as part of their social strategy. And there's not much other social innovation that have tried to do similar things. So they're original. So originality is important. The fourth driver is they address multiple problems at one go. One example is a social innovation project that offers job opportunities to intern therapists to provide training to students with special needs. So their goal is actually to help students with special needs, but they also work with intern therapists, because they know a lot of intern therapists take many years to build up the experience before they are able to practice as a therapist. So they're creating job opportunities for these therapists, very young therapists. So they're addressing this social problems, multiple problems at one go. And so you can see some of these factors are very similar with the qualitative findings from the international samples that I mentioned earlier. For example, originality and addressing problems at one go. The other characteristics or drivers of high-performing social innovation for Hong Kong social innovation projects is having a unique product or service. So one example of this is a project that developed an innovative assistive device for people with Parkinson's disease. And the same technology can be used to solve other problems, so unique products. The other is they have a sustainable business models. And for example, there's one project that social innovation project that has income from wholesale, but also they can have income from retail. So they have a retail outlets, but they're able to work with some distributors or partners to sell them in a wholesale manner. And another characteristics or driver is they have a strong emphasis on financial performance. For example, they say you must have a sustainable business model to support your social innovation project, because we found that some social innovators do not really pay attention to the importance of having because if the social innovator do not think financial performance is important, then they are more likely not to do anything, not to do a lot of things to develop the social innovation project to be financially sustainable. But if they think financial performance is important to them, and they are more likely to emphasize on financial performance, and as a result, they are more likely to be high performing. And the other characteristics are they have diversified. The high performing social innovation project from Hong Kong have diversified partners from different sectors. For example, this one project that have partnerships with business consultants, NGOs, district councillors, and commercial suppliers to support its daily operation. And another example is a social innovation project that have multiple funding sources. For example, this one, a project that received funding from a university, from a large Singaporean bank's foundation, and 2 local grant schemes. And the last 3 characteristics or drivers of this high-performing social innovation from Hong Kong is they have a clear leadership role. And what we mean by this is not only about division of labor, who's doing what, but also having time to focus doing things. For example, many of the low-performing ones that we studied, the leader of the social innovation projects have other full-time jobs, or they don't have a clear person who is handling what in the project, while the high-performing ones have the founder who takes up a role as a CEO and focus on the business and product development, while having co-founders who focus on administration and operational aspects and provide support to the founder. So as simple as having clear leadership role is very important. An important driver of high-performing social innovation. And the other is leveraging their prior knowledge and resources. We found that one of these high-performing social innovation, the founder leveraged his prior knowledge in biomedical engineering and prior product development experience to work with Parkinson's patients. And also having serial entrepreneurial experience, which means that having more than one experience in entrepreneurship projects is very important. So one example is a social innovation project in which the founder have different entrepreneurial experience, starting different companies. They develop different kind of clinical management systems and for different kind of healthcare institutions. So a summary of this, we have talked about them. So in comparison to those that are low performing, we found that the low performing have various characteristics which are the reverse from what I've just discussed right now. For example, they tend to be less original in the solution, they tend to lack revenue model, they tend to have unattractive product or services to the target beneficiaries or to the largest stakeholders in the society. They lack a commitment of their founding team, they have a lack of prior knowledge in the business. They tend to have a heavy dependence on volunteers. These very important factors as well. And also they tend to lack funding sources, they lack collaborations with the business sectors. And also we found that they tend to adopt community organizing approach. We're not saying that if you have a community organizing approach, you're more likely to be having low performance, but it happens that those that are in our sample low performing have all these more or less these characteristics. So to come up with a summary of the two studies, quantitatively and qualitatively, we come up with this framework, the framework of drivers of social innovation performance. We come up with this social innovation performance in terms of their innovativeness, usefulness, and impact are driven by all these factors. First, in terms of the commercial strategy of the social innovation, you need to have a viable revenue models. Second, in terms of the human capital, the high-performing ones, if you are having the founders of the social innovation who have prior knowledge and work experience in the business sector, then it has an impact, a positive impact on the performance of the social innovation projects. And thirdly, if you have better social capital, for example, the social innovation projects founders or the teams have better networks with big companies, for-profit companies, and have multiple funding sources, then they are more likely to improve. They are more likely to improve the performance of the social innovation. And then the social innovation that have this kind of social strategy, they're original and creative. They can change the existing social relations. They change the traditional process of delivering social services. They're more likely to drive better social innovation performance. So in terms of the conclusion, we distill it further. We come up with two large broad dimensions. First, for social innovators and social innovation projects who are going to be more successful, who wanted to be more successful, they need to pay attention to these two characteristics. First, have a business orientation. This is a little bit counterintuitive because a lot of social innovation project owners or founders tend to think the social aspect is the most important because they are doing social innovation. But what we found is the business aspect of the social innovation is very important if you want to do really successful social innovation projects. You need to have a social innovation that is financially sustainable and have the founders that have prior experience in business and partnerships with and gather resources from the corporations. What does it mean if you don't have one? It means that we need to find a good way to have a good financial sustainability. Right? And this is related to originality and creativity that I'll talk about in a moment. But if you don't have prior experience in business, you can have co-founders who can complement your own lack of experience in business, or you have team members who are very strong in business. And if you don't have partnerships, then it's a good way to find ways to have partnerships and gather resources from big corporations. This shows that corporations are very important in helping the social innovation projects to be very successful. And secondly, it's very important to be original and creative. For example, having creativity in the products or the service design. Actually, if you are creative and original, it's more likely to help you able to gain funders or to gain buyers who are willing to purchase the social innovation services or products that you launch. And in terms of creativity of the process of delivering the social innovation, and also the creativity in changing the social relations are very important. And we found that these creative practices, original practices, can lead to new possibilities to meet different social needs. So we come to these implications for policy and recommendations. So in essence, this research found that it's very important to engage the business sector in the social innovation. Some social innovation project owners tend to think that social innovation is a domain of a social sphere, social sector. We don't want to talk to the business people, but in fact, those that are very successful ones have engaged the business sector very successfully and found ways how to work with them. But this also tells us that the business sector, the corporates, need to pay more attention. They can do their own CSR, for example, but they can also do a very good thing for the society, or they can also do a very successful CSV, creating shared value, or doing their own corporate social innovation or corporate social entrepreneurship by engaging the social innovation directly instead of starting their own social innovation projects. So these partnerships between the business and the social innovation is very important. And this goes to a very important message for policymakers, how to find ways to get them to work together. The second policymakers is having resource mix. What I've told earlier is that the highly successful social innovation projects tend to have either very strong business model that are able to generate income in a very sustainable basis, or you have multiple sources of funding to support your projects. This is what we call resource mix. If you are have a very good, very great social innovation products or services that enable you to generate steady and stable income over the years, actually you can only rely on one resource, which is the sales of these projects, and this is great. Then you don't need to have a lot of mix. But if you are not so strong, then it's important to have multiple components of your resources. For example, having a good business model, having a lot of funders who are willing to fund you, even donations. So having a good broad basket of resource mix is very good. People say don't put all your eggs in one basket, and this is the essence of it. So having a mix of different resources to help you keep going sustainably is very important. And we're also suggesting that having an e-platform is very important for impact investors and the social innovators to meet, but not only providing funding, but also providing advice and providing building the networks of the social innovation projects is very important. And hopefully this will help. And last but not least is creativity and original thinking. We found that being original, being creative in a social innovation projects is very important to drive the more success in the social innovation projects. But how can we be more creative and be more original? Some people say, well, I'm limited. There are a lot of creativity and creativity courses that can be done. For example, in our own teaching, we use one example is bricolage. Bricolage is use what you have and try to mix them together and come up with what could be new things. For example, you open up your fridge and see what vegetables or meat or fish that you have, and try to think what kind of different combination that you can have to create something new. And this is just one example of how you can train people to be more creative. And we have a bunch of different tools that we have used in our own teaching in social innovation to the adults and also to students. And of course, it also means that it's good to employ people who are creative, who are original thinkers, who are silo breakers, who are cross-disciplinary thinkers. These are very important type of people that you can partner with, you can employ, you can work together with to develop a more successful social innovation projects. That's it. A quick summary of this 3.5-year projects, and I thank you for your attention, and hopefully this research can be very useful for everyone in Hong Kong in the social innovation sector. Thank you. Bye-bye. Before I close this, I would like to thank a number of people who have assisted me in this project in the past 3.5 years. These are very important people: Eiko Shang Liang, Maggie Young, Tiffany Choi, and Sigrid Chong. All of great assistants who help in this project in various stages in the data collection, in analysis, reporting of this project. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.